Ladies and gentlemen, Kevin Wall.
Fun lovers and truth seekers, you have come to the right place. It's live and local now for a Friday. Brand new Nevada Voices coming up later in the hour. And last night, I attended a debate, or a candidates forum, whatever you want to call it, for the Senate District 6 Republican nomination. Victoria Seaman against Erv Nelson, two members of the Assembly. Erv Nelson had to move into District 6 in February. There was a debate last night. Erv Nelson, by the way, was in this studio 6-8 months ago after the session and tried to explain away voting for the largest tax increase in the history of our state. He is a practicing attorney, and last night he sounded like an attorney, long-winded. It was painful. It was painful to listen to him try and explain this. Victoria Seaman with us online. She's running for the Senate in District 6. And Victoria, your thoughts on what went down last night? He talked like a lawyer. You talked like a plain person. What was your impression?
Well, it was all very interesting, and I can just say from the audience what my impression was is they just weren't having it. This is why people are so disgusted with politicians, because they will weave a web of lies. And there were people I heard walked out calling Erv Nelson a liar. They just couldn't listen anymore. And my impression was here was a guy who blatantly is giving door to door because there's no one there to debate him, that he cut 95% of taxes for small businesses. And in reality, he voted for the largest tax hike in Nevada state history. So how do you do that? And at least 18 other taxes. So last night, he was questioned on that, on this literature that he's passing out. And it was painful. It was very painful. The crowd was, you could tell, was very disgusted. And this is why people are coalescing to Trump. They've had it with the establishment. And what was so surprising is, my campaign manager kept saying, how can he show up? What is he going to say? And I said, they live in a bubble. They live in this bubble. They don't understand what the people are feeling and what the people really are disgusted by what they're doing.
Well, and you know what's amazing is that these people, whether it's P.K. O'Neill or whether it's Erv Nelson or any of these rhinos that ended up voting for the largest tax increase in the history of our state, you simply can't explain that away. You can walk it back, you can spin it, and again, Erv did a really nice job last night of trying to spin the thing, but it went right over the people's heads. It was all about process and this and that, and he refused to. In fact, he never really talked about how this really wasn't for the kids. It wasn't really for education, because only $600 million of the $1.5 billion goes to education, and that's one I don't understand.
Correct. And he also could not explain, in fact, had stated that he supported Marco Rubio but didn't like his immigration policy. And I reminded him that he voted for SJR 21, urging Congress to give amnesty to illegals. And then
he denied it. So
no, he didn't exactly deny it. He said, I didn't understand the bill or something.
Well,
yes.
And the dog ate my homework.
It was painful. But it was so, these people in Sun City, they're Sun City conservatives. They're informed voters. They do their homework. And what they don't tolerate is lying politicians like my opponent, Erv Nelson. They do not tolerate it.
And you may not have heard it from where you were. I was out in the middle of the crowd sitting next to my buddy Jim Marchant, and you could hear the audible groans every time he lied. You could hear these groans in the crowd, and of course everybody wanted to be civil, I guess. But there was just that auditory groan. Oh, that's not true. And I heard it a lot where I was sitting. Let me just ask you, how do you size up this race? Obviously, an open seat. Your thoughts on where the race is now? Will there be more of these types of forums for you in District 6?
We are going to challenge Erv Nelson to more debate, and hopefully he will show up so the people can see who he actually really is. Because he is going door to door and stating that he cut taxes on 95% of businesses, and that is not true. Just is not, we proved that last night. This man not only didn't cut taxes for any businesses, but every small corporation now has to pay $200 more per corporation. It is just appalling to watch somebody sit there and want to represent you that is blatantly lying to the people.
It's absolutely amazing. I know that whenever you talk about these races, you got to talk about fundraising. You got to talk about money. It's the mother's milk of politics. And I must ask you, we know that a lot of these rhinos who sided with the governor and his cronies to pass the largest tax increase in the history of our state, a lot of these guys are getting a large amount of money from PACs and all kinds of different organizations and groups on behalf of the governor and his cronies. How's it going fundraising-wise? Can you keep up with Erv Nelson?
Yeah, well, of course, he's got all the lobbyists and these PACs that are now being investigated, by the way. Michael Roberson, running for CD3, is being investigated for this type of moving money around with PACs. It was in the Review Journal. And, yes, they have heavily funded my opponent. My opponent raised $121,000 before he actually moved into Senate District 6. While he sat on the Energy Committee, he was getting checks from NV Energy for his Senate race. It's appalling. But I have raised money from people. People in the district have sent me small checks, and small businesses who are suffering because of Erv Nelson and the others who raised the largest tax hike in Nevada state history. They are helping me with my race, and we will prevail. And a lot of people just wanting to come out and help and volunteer because, we're fighting against big business, big lobbyists.
Victoria, I wish you well. Be safe on the campaign trail. I know we'll talk again soon. Thanks so much.
Thank you for enjoying the debate, and thank you always for having me on.
And by the way, if folks want to know more about your campaign, where do they go?
VictoriaSeaman.com, and you can call me at 702-466-0407. That is my private cell number, and I take my own calls. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Victoria. Victoria Seaman joining us. Running for the State Senate District 6 against Erv Nelson. That is a nasty, nasty primary that's going on right now. And last night I attended the District 6 debate between Victoria Seaman and Erv Nelson. And Victoria Seaman stood her ground and pulled no punches. My opponent did this. My opponent did that. It was civil for the most part. There were some people that got a little angry in the crowd. And there were people that thought, you could literally hear it. They applauded Victoria Seaman overwhelmingly. There was some scattered applause for Erv Nelson. He had family in the crowd. But I'm going to tell you something. Erv Nelson sat in the seat next to me in this studio 6-8 months ago, whatever it was, right the week after the 78th Nevada legislature recessed. And he said, I might get primaried, and this is before we even thought there was a Senate race in his future. What Erv Nelson has done, he has voted for the largest tax increase in the history of our state. He sends out mailers that essentially say, I cut taxes on 95% of small businesses in this state. He leaves out the part that he passed the largest tax increase in the history of our state. And it is a tax that has a ceiling of $4 million. If your business does not generate $4 million or more, you don't pay that tax. The problem is the legislature can come back in 2017 and lower that floor to $2 million, to $500,000. to 50,000 if they find they don't get enough revenue. If they find that the revenue isn't sufficient. And last night, more than once, Erv Nelson tried to pawn off the idea that this was about education. This was about our kids. He never explained how only $600 million of $1.5 billion goes to education. Maybe I'm missing something. Or maybe Erv Nelson just isn't telling the truth about what he did. He's an attorney, and he can spin it any way he wants, but to plain people like you and me, and by the way, this is going on all over the state, whether it's P.K. O'Neill or Paul Anderson or any of these people that voted for the largest tax increase in the history of our state. I want to ask you the question, because this to me is important. What do we do? And by the way, one thing that I have learned, and I've learned this through focus groups and different things that have been going on around the state, a lot of you don't even know until you get your tax bill that your taxes just went up as a small business person. You don't even know. And I'm not trying to make aspersions or anything like that. I mean, I'm just saying people just are unaware. When they do find out that their taxes have been increased, that folks that were paying $20,000 are now paying $1 million, when they find out, they get really angry. I want to find out if folks around the state are angry about the largest tax increase in the history of our state. And then politicians, Republicans, rhinos, are trying to talk it back. Well, it was for our kids. It was for education. We had to do something about K through 12. We had all these great programs, the ESAs, Zoom schools, Victory schools, whatever it is. We had to be able to fund it. Well, only $600 million of this tax increase goes to the kids. Where is the rest of the money going? Is it going to ELLs? Is it going to school lunches and breakfast, 3 meals a day for kids? That's what our school districts are starting to do. I'm going to open up our phone lines right now, 1-844, the number 2, Nevada. That's 844-263-8232. And you'll recall, when the legislature passed the largest tax increase in the history of our state, I promised you that I would do everything I could to make sure that these rhinos, these Republican in name only Republicans, are held accountable. You cannot let people campaign as tax cutters, fiscal conservatives, and then pass and support, not just cast a vote, actually support the largest tax increase in the history of our state, and then have there be no political repercussion. And by the way, these people are very nice people. I know Erv Nelson. He's been in studio, a very nice, gracious guy, kind of a country attorney. But you cannot let even people who are nice do things that are not nice and then try and spin it as, well, we had to do this. If there would have been a $600 million hole in our budget. It's called prioritizing. Families do it every day. No, I'm sorry, we can't afford the trip to Disneyland. My wife just lost her job. I guess we can't go to Disneyland this summer. Families do this all the time. Why can't government do this? We'll talk about that and a lot more. I want to hear from you. 1-844, the number 2, Nevada. That's 844-263-8232. All across the state of Nevada, you're listening to Live and Local Now.